Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. Today we're back with the High Elves. ALITH are going to be leading the way against the Dark Elves. You don't get to see ALITH too often. I've been on record as saying I think he's one of the worst lords in the game. He's just, not super mobile. He does reasonable missile damage, but he's not super accurate. But let's see how he's able to do here. So the idea is we're stacking the missile buffs from the Handmaiden and ALITH. So let's go ahead and take a look. We've got Quicksilver Shot, Horn of Isha, Enchanted Spyglass, Martial Prowess, of course, the Dark in the Skies, and Stone of Midnight. So the Dark in the Skies, let's see, Horn of Isha and Quicksilver Shot giving a plus 25 total reload skill, plus some additional missile damage there, and that is supporting the Lothern Seaguard. We've got 2 Sisters of Avalorn, 2 Lothern Seaguard, 2 Swordmasters of Hoeth. We've got 3 Spearmen, 2 on each flank, with the Scions of Mathlon in the center, as well as a single Flamespire Phoenix. For the Dark Elves, we've got 4 units of Corsairs up front, a couple of Dread Spears, 2 units of Dark Shards with shields, Witch Elves, more Dread Spears in the back, Malekith with some Cold One Knights over here, and over here we've got some Doomfire Warlocks and more Cold One Knights. So without further ado, let's get the battle underway. You can see the, ALITH basically acting like a bolt thrower here, just opening up shots, starting to snipe out some of those Corsairs already. Looks like the Moonbow firing in at the bolt thrower. It does manage to actually blow up one of the bolt thrower pieces there, so that's a very effective use of that Moonbow there. Bringing that Reaper bolt thrower down to only 2 artillery pieces. Very, very powerful. Does look like ALITH is going to continue to shoot at them, and I have seen ALITH is reasonably effective at shooting at artillery pieces. If he can make contact with the piece itself, it's quite easy for him to destroy them, but at the very least he's going to do some damage to the crew there. You can see the Dark Elves pushing up through the marsh here. I believe some cavalry. Yep, looks like the Cold One Knights going around the side there. So we'll see. The DAKKA's going to open up here, and there is a lot of DAKKA, especially with all this reload skill. These High Elf archers are just going to be machine gunning. Just check out that reload rate. I mean, just almost immediately loosing off another volley there. So yeah, Corsairs, this is the main reason I don't bring them in this particular matchup. I'm not really a fan here, mostly because they don't have a missile block chance, and this is what can happen. These Corsairs getting a light show and just getting lit up in general by the DAKKA of the High Elves here, which is incredibly powerful, make no mistake. These 2 units in the center are more or less not even going to reach the front line engagement. They're just going to get gunned down in the open field there. Then the High Elf player is going to go ahead and switch over to the Witch Elves and start to focus them down. Again, very high value target. Out on the flanks, the 2 Corsairs that did manage to reach a line are going to be intercepted by the Swordmasters here. They do get a Word of Pain, and looks like the Cold One Knight's collapsing, but still they are just about able to see off those Corsairs there, and the Witch Elves getting routed off. Now the Lothern Seaguard focus firing on the Dark Shards. These guys do have shields, but Flamespire Phoenix tried to come down in the back line to disrupt. Did manage to get some damage done, and it is also tying down a couple of the cav units here that could potentially be going after archers, so that in and of itself is relatively cost effective. Meanwhile, in the back line, some other cav has managed to compromise things. Thankfully, Sisters of Avalorn have pretty good melee defense, and the Scions of Mathlon also on station to support here, not to mention Crossfire coming over from the other side, which just looks absolutely incredible. I love Sisters of Avalorn, mostly because their missiles are quite flashy, but Malekith standing in here, not taking too much damage so far, but a lot of the support for him getting whittled away. You can see more fire coming in there, and finally these Cold One Knights, which had been dealing with the Phoenix, going to come to the front line. The Doomfire Warlocks, though, still trying to chase the Phoenix off, which did manage to get its healing proc, so these guys are going to have to fully chase it off the side of the map, which will, again, tie them up for quite some time, making the Phoenix, although it didn't necessarily get a lot of damage done, it is cost-effective in that way. Bolt throwers still firing, more units trying to come in here, but you can see the Cold One Knights, as they try and charge in, are going to be taking a light show. Lothern Seaguard, of course, have spears. They don't necessarily have the best combat stats, but they can kind of hang around, especially against units of cavalry without the best stats. Cold One Knights generally don't have the best combat stats, so even with that Murderous Prowess active, they're still not doing too hot. Murderous Prowess, of course, kicking off map-wide, but at this point you can see the balance power starting to tip in the High Elves' favor. Swordmasters working over units on the flanks there, routing off the last of the Corsairs, and in the center, the High Elf archers are being tied down at the moment, but they've already got quite a bit of damage done, And, you know, the Dark Elf units that are fighting here are incredibly tattered. You can see the Scions of Mathlon holding out quite well. And interestingly enough, because the High Elf player did not bring a caster, which personally I believe is a big mistake, that does mean that this Aura of Protection is going to be up pretty much permanently throughout the battle, because the Winds of Magic, of course, will never drop, because there's no one to use them. So, you know, that in and of itself is relatively effective. You can see that Scions of Mathlon effect, Aura of Protection, is affecting most of the units in this pocket. So I kind of see what he was going for there. You know, I still think it's always in your benefit to bring a caster, but certainly if you want some benefit to not having a caster, the High Elves do have a handful of units which do reward you for having high Winds of Magic. So Gaze of Malice going down there, doing some decent damage to those Swordmasters and the Lothern Seaguard, but at this point, the Dark Elves just aren't able to hold their leadership together. They're getting pushed off all across the board. You can see the Handmaiden here opening up shots. She's been battling Malekith a little bit here and there. She, of course, has a spear, not really meant to fight in melee, although she does have reasonable combat stats. Just not the best armor piercing, and the Handmaiden suffers a little bit from the same issue as the Lithnar in that she's not super accurate, which is why you don't see me using her super often. But I really like this kind of Missile Death Star build with the Lithnar and the Handmaiden, providing some stacking buffs, and just the elite missiles gunning down the Dark Elves there. Because the Dark Elf player took a front line of Corsairs, which had no missile block chance, it ended up being really rough. If that front line would have just been like Dread Spears and Bleak Swords mixed together, and just cut the Corsairs, and maybe use the cost to bring a few more mobile units, might have been potentially a lot better, just because the Bleak Swords will actually trade extremely cost-effectively with Lothern Seaguard and melee, and, you know, they obviously have shields, very good missile block chance. I believe it's 55% for Dread Spears and Bleak Swords, so yeah, I would definitely recommend against bringing Corsairs in this particular matchup. Previously, you know, when Total War Warhammer 2 first came out, I would have said Corsairs are a good pick here, but as it stands right now, the High Elves are such a powerful missile faction that Corsairs are potentially very risky there, but you can see the Dread Spears charging in here. Scions of Mathlon going to go ahead and meet them and push them back here. Malekith battling the Lithnar and the Handmaiden, kind of ping-ponging back between the two of them, but of course anytime he does that, he's going to take fire from the other one, so it looks like the Handmaiden thinking about popping a shot off on him, but at the moment deciding not to. But yeah, it's just a matter of time before Malekith's leadership gives out. Going after a Lithnar one more time here. But here come the Swordmasters to support. And, yeah, Malekith's leadership all of a sudden isn't looking too hot. Critical army losses going down. You can see some Spearmen had pushed up over all the way to the Bolt Thrower there. So it is gonna be victory for the High Elves. And very well played to Angry John. I don't remember, unfortunately, your Discord username. I got a ton of replays that got sent to me, but thank you very much for sending it. Super fun battle. Again, I definitely would always recommend bringing bringing a caster as the High Elves, but certainly with the Scions of Mathlon and even the Phoenix, I believe, has a similar ability. You can get some value from not having a caster, but I definitely recommend bringing one. But anyway, the Missile Death Star ended up working out pretty well here. 70 kills, 79, 50, 69, so all the archer unit is performing quite well. The Swordmasters out on the flanks were able to deal with the Black Ark Corsairs relatively easily, and yeah, Scions of Mathlon and the other Spearmen doing their jobs, kind of protecting Lithnar and the Handmaiden, providing their missile buffs. Lithnar ended up getting 55 kills, which is actually not bad at all for him. Evening up with Malekith, which, you know, considering Malekith has, like, Gaze of Malice and spells and is just overall a better lord, that's pretty impressive. But yeah, definitely, I already kind of said my piece about the Corsairs here. Dark Shards, you know, if you're going to bring them in this matchup, the shields make sense, but just in general, actually, countering this type of elite missile play as the Dark Elves, I think that there are potentially some better ways that you could go about it here. So let's go ahead and switch over to the edgy elves here. So Malekith on the cold one is pretty much always going to be a cost-effective choice. Personally, I like to just bring Power of Darkness. Word of Pain can potentially be useful here, but if you just bring Power of Darkness and Soul Stealer, you can get as much healing as possible. At least that's the idea. I would also recommend all these items are potentially good, but The Circlet of Iron, of course, because the High Elves are almost always going to be bringing a caster, can potentially be good here. Or else Destroyer, if you're worried about them not bringing a caster. But overall in the front line, I would say Dread Spears are a good choice. Just mix them in with some Bleak Swords to give yourself lots and lots of numbers. And then I'm going to tank up pretty heavily on these Reaper Bolt Throwers. You know, it's not a pick that people expect super often as the Dark Elves. These things are good at counter-artillery fire. Of course, against the High Elves, they're literally facing like a mirror of themselves. But if you use the Scatter Shot, it's actually very good at taking out High Elf skirmishers, I've found, especially at a greater distance. So if the Dark Elf player had had a build like this, he would have been able to force the High Elf to come to him, and also would have been able to do a ton of damage to those elite missile units before they got into range with these bolt throwers. Now you're going to need some mobility, a couple Cold One Knights, certainly, just in case of Dragon Princes. These guys can help in that fight as well. And then maybe just some Dark Riders with shields to even out more numbers. Again, High Elves are relatively weak to Swarm. You'll find that's true for almost any faction that's going to be battling them. So I would generally recommend, you know, going with a very wide Swarm type build can be very beneficial. But with the leftover monies that we have, we're going to go ahead and just dump some chevrons into this front line just to make them a bit more cost effective here. We can actually go up, not quite that high, but let's see. Something like this, where the Bleak Swords are actually almost 600 points. They have great combat stats. Again, good missile block chance. They'll trade well against High Elf Spearmen. They won't necessarily trade well against Swordmasters, but they can at least hold them in place for a reasonable amount of time for your other units to get in and get the work done. This type of build may be a little bit more vulnerable to like maybe an elite infantry or even like a heavy Dragon Prince build potentially, but I still think it could be reasonably useful. But again, just the units that lack a missile block chance against the High Elves are potentially going to be very risky, so I would generally recommend that they be left to the sidelines. So hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this one. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button, so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again for watching, we'll see you next time.